Supreme Court reshapes power. Iran talks face uncertainty. Venezuela quake tolls rise. And South Africa migrant tensions. Greetings, humanity. Let's grok the news, starting with the most important story in the world today. Dateline, Washington, D.C. The U.S. Supreme Court delivered a series of landmark rulings that significantly reshape presidential authority while issuing important guidance on elections and privacy. In a closely watched set of decisions closing out its term, the justices expanded the president's power to remove certain federal officials but drew limits around independent agencies such as the Federal Reserve. The court ruled that President Trump can fire members of the Federal Trade Commission and other similar bodies, rolling back nearly 90 years of precedent on so-called independent agencies. However, in a separate 6-3 decision, the justices blocked any immediate effort to dismiss Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook, preserving the central bank's operational independence. Legal authorities say that the mixed outcome balances executive power with the need for economic stability. This observer wonders about balancing the outcome against the spirit of the Constitution itself. This is why the central bank must be ended with congressional action or other constitutional amendment. However, it is good news that other so-called independent agencies are now clearly subject to review and presidential authority. On voting matters, the court upheld a state law allowing mail-in ballots to be counted if they arrive days after Election Day, rejecting a challenge from the Trump administration. Justices emphasized that states retain broad authority over election procedures as long as they follow constitutional guardrails. Well, they seem to have tossed the guardrails out, haven't they? This decision comes amid ongoing national debates about election integrity and access. This observer thinks that in this case the court has decided in favor of the Washington establishment rather than the American people. There is nothing within the Constitution that enables authorities, such as the states, to make an election day into election weeks or even months. No other civilized nation in the world tolerates such lax, easily corrupted election policies. In another ruling, the court sharply limited so-called geofence warrants that allow police to search broad cell phone location data near crime scenes. Justices said that such sweeping digital dragnets raise serious Fourth Amendment concerns and now require more targeted probable cause. Civil liberties groups welcomed the privacy win, while law enforcement officials expressed worry about losing a key investigative tool. Oddly, this observer sees the silver lining in this decision. Is it unreasonable search to find every cell phone that was near a crime scene? I mean, I see the point. On the other hand, how many cases would be swiftly solved if only we could know who was there? Did they find the right balance? These decisions arrived on a single dramatic day and touched core questions of separation of powers. Supporters of stronger presidential authority hailed the firing power expansion as a correction to what they called unaccountable administrative state. The critics warned that it could politicize independent watchdogs, as if they aren't already. The Fed ruling drew praise from economists who argued political interference in monetary policy would spook markets and raise borrowing costs for families and businesses. Again, this observer thinks the existence of the central bank itself was originally unconstitutional. The U.S. Treasury was to set monetary policy, which by intention was a political decision. How can it ever be otherwise? The only question is, do you want an elected president making these political decisions or unelected private bankers to make these political monetary decisions? White House officials said the president views the overall package as a net victory for accountability. Trump called the late ballot decision a tremendous loss for election security and renews his push for stricter voter ID requirements nationwide. Democrats countered that the rulings protect democratic norms and prevent executive overreach. May this observer mention that it was not normal to have these kind of mail-in ballots counted days, weeks after an election until COVID. This is not a norm. Legal experts note that these cases will likely influence future disputes over agency independence, voting rules, and digital surveillance. Lower courts must now apply the new standards, and this could trigger additional litigation before the 2026 midterms and beyond. The rulings also arrive as public trust in institutions remains divided along party lines. and it shifts with every election. Reaction from Capitol Hill split predictably. Republican leaders praised the court for restoring constitutional balance. Democratic lawmakers expressed concern about weakened protections for independent oversight, as they call it. Markets reacted calmly, with major indices showing modest gains as investors digested the federal bank safeguard. Well, the markets love for everything to stay the same. The Supreme Court term ends, leaving several high-profile cases for the next session, including ongoing disputes over immigration enforcement and regulatory authority. For now, today's decisions mark a clear shift in the legal landscape governing executive power in America. They will shape how future presidents manage the federal bureaucracy and how states conduct elections. The Supreme Court building saw heightened security yesterday as demonstrators on both sides gathered peacefully. No major incidents reported, and the justices are now in recess until October, which means no more special rulings, no more good rulings, no more bad rulings until October. I'm Robert Gardner, using Grok each weekday to truthfully summarize the news, well seasoned with my opinions. I apologize for missing yesterday's newscast. We had a local internet outage, and I can't use Grok if I can't reach Grok. Likewise, the rest of the news outlets throughout the world. So I'll be working on a workaround for that if it happens again. We will review a roundup of the most critical reports in the world right after this. M.S. Gardner, my beautiful, devoted wife, is author of Wolf's Bane, a dark, serious, modern take on an old fairy tale. It's a page-turning Southern Gothic story for adults. Wolf's Bane, available now at thecuriousauthor.com or amazon.com. Now, we grok the news with headlines from around the world. Dateline: Caracas, Venezuela. Rescue efforts continue in Venezuela after powerful earthquakes killed more than 1,700 people and left thousands missing. An 11-year-old girl was pulled alive from the rubble 3 days after the disaster. Officials reopened the port of La Guaira to speed international aid. Hopes of finding more survivors are fading, however, as aftershocks shake the region. Dateline: Pretoria. South African authorities deployed heavy security ahead of planned anti-migrant protests. Thousands of foreigners have already left the country fearing violence as a June 30th deadline is passing. Police urged calm while rights groups warned of potential xenophobic attacks in major cities. You might ask, where are the foreigners coming from, migrating to South Africa? Well, from other South African nations. This observer recalls an elderly minister from South Africa who once told him that apartheid meant keeping the tribes apart. Dateline: Beijing. Self-exiled Chinese billionaire Guo Huangui has received a 30-year prison sentence in the United States for massive fraud. American prosecutors called it one of the largest such cases involving a Chinese national. The verdict sends a strong signal on transnational financial crime. Dateline: Monaco. Police are hunting a suspect after a deliberate explosion injured a Ukrainian oligarch and family members in an upscale Monaco building. The blast shook the wealthy enclave and prompted a major security review across the Principality of Monaco. Dateline: Berlin. At least 6 people died in a shooting at a mothers and children's center in Stade, North Germany. Police arrested a suspect. The attack shocked the community and comes amid broader European concerns over rising violent incidents. This observer suspects some migrant was involved, as usual. Dateline: Jakarta, Indonesia. The founder of ride-hailing giant Gojek was sentenced to 10 years in prison in a major corruption case involving Chromebook procurement. The verdict highlights ongoing efforts to clean up public contracting in Southeast Asia's largest economy. Dateline: Richmond, Virginia. The National Rifle Association secured a court injunction blocking Virginia's new assault weapons and high-capacity magazine ban just before it was to take effect. Gun rights advocates called it a timely victory for the Second Amendment. For those of you who don't know, the Second Amendment to the Constitution of the United States in the Bill of Rights gives Americans, or I should say recognizes America's right to keep itself armed against a tyrannical government. Dateline, Augusta, Maine. Incumbent Senator Susan Collins is outperforming her 2020 polling numbers against Democratic challenger Graham Plattner, the notorious Graham Plattner, in the Maine Senate race. Recent surveys show that the veteran and rhino Republican maintained a solid lead so far in a traditionally competitive state. So the choice is a Republican in name only or a Nazi who claims to be a Democrat. Dateline, New York, New York, and across the nation. Democratic socialist candidates, well, let's call them what they are, communists, are building on recent local wins as they compete in the Colorado primaries. House hopefuls aligned with figures like Zohran Mamdani, the Muslim Marxist mayor of New York, are emphasizing wealth inequality and progressive economic reforms. In other words, taking from some to give to their own voters. Dateline, Minneapolis, Minnesota. The mayor of Minneapolis has lifted a long-standing ban on gay sex bathhouses in a move welcomed by the usual activists who would welcome such moves and criticized by public health voices concerned about sexual transmission risks. The policy change takes effect immediately. This observer will not comment. It's just a sign of the times, folks. Dateline, Springfield, Ohio. Local residents voiced strong support for President Trump's Haitian immigration enforcement policies, saying they restore the rule of law. Community leaders described noticeable improvement in daily law and order after previous strains on city services. Yes, the Haitians were killing the ducks and geese and kittens and puppies in Springfield, Ohio. It's true. And there was no reason for them to be there. Dateline, Doha, Qatar. Uncertainty clouds the next round of U.S.-Iran negotiations. Tehran says it will only attend talks if Washington honors prior commitments, while American officials signal continued pressure over the Strait of Hormuz. Dateline, Brussels, Belgium. The European Union is tightening trade measures against China amid growing concerns over their own deindustrialization and massive trade imbalances. Officials cited unfair subsidies and market access barriers as key drivers of the tougher stance. Funny, this observer seems to remember President Trump saying the same thing a couple of years ago and being excoriated by European leaders. And now they're saying the same thing. Dateline, Kinshasa in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Health authorities confirm more than 1,300 Ebola cases now, hundreds of deaths in the ongoing outbreak. Officials banned large gatherings in the capital region as medical teams race to contain the deadly virus. Dateline, Lima, Peru. Keiko Fujimori was officially declared the winner of Peru's presidential election after a narrow and contested vote. The conservative leader promised order and economic hope as the country navigates political polarization. This observer is happy that yet another South American nation has decided to embrace Western values rather than Marxist machinations. Dateline, New Delhi, India. A major fire at a petrochemical plant in eastern India injured at least 20 workers. Emergency teams contained the blaze while officials launched a full investigation into safety compliance at the industrial site. Dateline, Moscow, Russia. President Putin acknowledged fuel shortages caused by repeated Ukrainian strikes on refineries are real. The rare admission highlights pressure on Russia's economic energy infrastructure as the conflict enters another grinding phase with no end in sight. Dateline, San Francisco, California. The Archdiocese of San Francisco agreed to pay $395 million to settle long-running sexual abuse lawsuits. Church officials described the resolution, as painful but necessary for healing and moving forward. Well, it is a revolution. The sex scandals of that church, particularly in that area, have been unforgivable. Better a millstone were tied around the neck of these trusted clergy and they were thrown into the sea, then what awaits them hereafter? And that's according to the religion they proclaim they believe in. Dateline, Washington, D.C. WhatsApp announced it will soon let users replace phone numbers with usernames to boost privacy. The change comes as global regulators increase pressure on tech firms over data security and user protection. And I thank you for listening. Please join me tomorrow to once again Grok the News. I'm Robert Gardner. Godspeed and God bless.